Hello and good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful, glorious day here in Michigan, and we're really happy to have you all here. We have a super awesome show tonight, and we're really excited about it. A very interesting person who was recommended to us by a dear friend, Michael Carter, and we already know that we love this guy. So, RJ, do you want to tell the people a little bit about?
Sure. For those of you who might not know, our guest tonight, Paul Eno. I got to read this here. Let's see. Is it scrolled up?
Yep.
Is it all the way? Okay. So now marking nearly 53 years in paranormal research, Paul Eno was one of the first ghost investigators of the early 1970s. His early mentors included parapsychology pioneer Dr. Louisa Rhine,
Father
John J. Nicola, technical advisor for the film The Exorcist, and legendary first-generation ghost hunters Ed and Lorraine Warren of the Conjuring fame. Originally a student for the priesthood, Paul was expelled from the seminary in 1977 because of his paranormal work. Surprisingly, huh?
I love that.
He ended up as an award-winning New England newspaper and magazine journalist and the author of 8 books on the paranormal and 2 on history. He has appeared on History, Discovery, and Travel channels, and he and his son and colleague, Ben Eno, have lectured all over America and in Europe. The two have co-hosted the CBS Radio from 2009, 2014, and WOON 1240 AM, 99.3 FM in Boston, Worcester, Providence, Sunday's destination show, Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno for nearly 15 years. The show has estimated 3 million listeners in 68 countries. Paul serves on the Experiencer Resource Team of the Mutual UFO Network and the Research Committee of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Let's welcome Paul.
Paul Eno.
Wow.
Hey, we finally got
Deb and RJ. Thanks for the invitation.
Hi, Paul.
Well, thanks for being our guest tonight.
Yes, thank you. You were so interesting. And I'll tell you, as soon as I read that, you were kind of kicked out of the seminary because of your paranormal work, it's like, okay, I like this guy. Not that it's good to be kicked out, but that you're devoted. And a bit of a rebel. We kind of relate with that. So.
Oh, yes. More than a bit. Yeah.
So, Paul, we were talking earlier that, you were in the paranormal field. And back in the day, the paranormal field was dealing in looking for ghosts and improving life after death and all this stuff. But your road led you to the UFO ufology. And we did the same thing. And, we were talking back in the day, those two never really talked. They never communicated. And I'm just interested, how did that go? How'd that happen?
Okay, well, it happened because I'm a very annoying questioner.
Okay.
In the seminary, I would point out things like, the gospel says Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days. Well, Friday evening to Sunday morning is not 3 days. It's like a day and a half, right? It doesn't make any difference. But, I would drive him nuts with stuff like that. So it really began when I was 7 years old. And and you can imagine this is difficult to discuss, but I was a witness to my father's suicide.
Oh, no.
And
I'm sorry,
obviously a life-changing situation. And I would wonder, where is my father?
Right.
I was in the Enos are an old Yankee, Connecticut family, mostly Protestants, but I had one lonely French Canadian great-grandfather and somehow we all ended up Roman Catholic. My brother was already studying for the priesthood, and I was in a very strict Roman Catholic school in Connecticut. And the Sisters of Mercy, you can take the name with a grain of salt, would say things like, if you eat a hot dog on Friday or commit suicide, you go straight to hell. Well, my father was a wonderful guy. Turned out he had a brain tumor later on. So I asked my second grade teacher, the nuns were either saints or potential axe murderers,
Right.
And sure enough, I had one of the saints. And she said, essentially, God is bigger than all that. That really got me through.
Right.
So as time went by, as I say, where is my father? In 1967, I entered the seminary myself at the age of 14, when you could still do that. Not a good idea. However, by 1970, I had run into a few stories of ghosts. And I said, gee, I wonder if ghosts could be souls in purgatory. That old Roman Catholic belief
Right.
that if you're not quite bad enough to go to hell, not quite good enough to go to heaven, you go to purgatory for a while, and it satisfies the Western mania for pigeonholing everything. And so in the end of 1970, I found a case in Northeast Connecticut, which is a lovely rural area, colonial times where the Europeans were settling there. And this one was in the Hartford newspaper about an old man named Harry Chase, who had his old box camera, and he would go around this area and he would get a lot of weird things in his photographs since the late 1940s. So I said, this is interesting. So I got in touch with him. We did a lot of research. And in August of 71, 5 other seminary students accompanied me to Pomfret, Connecticut, to investigate or take a look at what we found out locally was called the Village of Voices.
Ooh.
And so Harry was in his 60s. He took us out there. As soon as we walked into this place, you could hear, and it was all overgrown. Nobody lived there anymore. In fact, nobody lived within half a mile.
Right.
You could hear cows mooing, dogs and cats. You could hear people talking. You could hear farm implements banging together. That was only the first thing that happened. That evening, and we didn't know what the heck this was about.
Right.
So that evening, we were on a little hill. Again, it's all woods above Nightingale Brook, where the people who lived there had a little mill in the late 1700s.
Uh-huh.
Well, we could hear the laughter of children, and it was very odd. And this was my first kind of introduction to the spatial oddities that happen in these cases. These voices were moving up and down this brook as if they were in a car going 60 miles an hour. There was no road anywhere near. And one thing I didn't dare say to my colleagues, and certainly not to the seminary authorities later on, I knew the names of some of these children.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how. It was a very jarring experience. And, I really found out this out in 74 in that Bridgeport poltergeist case. But it's not the phenomena that really shake you up. It's when they shatter your belief system.
Right.
Now, these are supposed to be dead people.
Yeah.
But they didn't seem to be dead at all. Never mind in purgatory. So I was very confused about what was going on. In later years, I found out that I was related to the Randall family, were the bulk of the population here.
Wow.
And so I don't know if that's a connection of some kind with why I knew who they were, but whatever. But I was very serious about my Catholic spirituality, so I kind of buried all that, so to speak.
Right.
Other things that happened in this case, we on the final day on our second expedition that fall, we all stood there on a bright Sunday morning, after we went to church like good seminarians, and we heard an ox cart or something like that coming down the path. And it was only an old cart path. It wasn't really a road.
Right.
But when we heard that, we got out of the way. It sounded so real. And figured out maybe somebody has a hobby, drives teams or that sort of thing. But it proceeded in front of us about 20 feet away in an area that had been a road in the late 1700s. We could hear the wooden wheels. We could hear the guy yelling, "Yeah," and the crack of a whip. The whole thing, the hoof beats of the oxen or horses, whatever, but we couldn't see it. Now, if I knew then what I think I know now, that was one of the Randalls, and I would have attempted to communicate.
Right.
And Mr. Randall, in 1770, whatever, would have had a very strange day. All right, because I later came to the conclusion that these people were not dead. They are it's more about time and space than it is about death.
Right.
If you look at modern physics, which I started to run into in the mid-70s, and really looked at it, death is impossible. If quantum mechanics of the kind we embrace is true,
right,
you have multiple versions of yourself. Every possible outcome exists somewhere or somewhen in the multiverse. Time is not an objective reality. It's all simultaneous. You put that all together, it totally transforms the paranormal. So I started operating on that by the end of the 70s. And that's a roundabout way to get to your UFO question, RJ. But it was in 1979, something told me, go outside and check the backyard. Don't just stay in the house. So sure enough, I went out and that expanded. And I found out if you could talk to the neighbors, they will tell you they have weird stuff going on too.
Okay.
And the UFO thing started when somebody said, "Oh, I saw a huge light land in that road over there, right outside their house." While there was poltergeist activity going on in the house next door.
Oh, wow.
So I said, "Whoa, there's something going on here that's way beyond the traditional approach." So I started to develop theories and methods around that, and that's really how it started. So when today, Ben and I specialize in what we refer to as flap areas, and we've actually had to come up with our own vocabulary to even talk about this stuff. Overwashes. We had to invent words. When you have one world washing over another or intersecting. And if you look at the paranormal history, this stuff is all over the place. The Mothman situation in the mid-60s in the Ohio Valley, there were all sorts of things going on besides the Mothman creature or creatures.
Yeah.
Where that come from in the first place. All kinds of UFOs. People were seeing a lot of other strange beings. They were picking up psychic power they never had before. And John Keel called it a window area. So that's pretty much how I got to bring in the UFO thing, was just by running into it almost inevitably. And the same thing happened with cryptids. Yeah. People would report seeing Bigfoot or something like that, or things that didn't even have names yet.
Right.
In connection with these cases. So today we look for patterns.
Yeah.
We get data on the phenomena. In Pennsylvania, where there was a huge flap area, we would have a neighborhood meeting every year, and we investigate cases for years. We started in 2005 on the Connecticut one, and we're still working on it.
Right.
In Pennsylvania, we started in 2016. I had an encounter with Bigfoot.
Nice.
Totally unexpectedly.
Nice.
Weird things in the sky. Everybody who comes to the neighborhood meetings, which grew too big for people's homes, they had to have it at a restaurant, said that they had seen strange lights and Bigfoot. in one context or another.
Right.
So that's how this all started.
Right. So maybe it's, I like when you say flaps. So maybe there's certain points on the planet that are connected to different worlds and different areas and different dimensions and different densities than others, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, actually, I kind of agree with John Keel that the whole planet is quote unquote haunted.
Right.
We use flap areas or triangles as research tools. How do you know that something is happening over here is or is not connected to something happening over here?
Right.
So these are often bounded by bodies of water, the ocean, or rivers or something. And again, it's just a research tool. How do you cover something of this scope? What we do in the large areas, and the Connecticut triangle is centered around Torrington. That's where it began. In 2005, somebody read my book, Footsteps in the Attic, and said, this multiverse thing is the only thing that explains all the goofy things that are happening around here. The family would sit in their living room and see legs hanging from the ceiling, walking as if on a road or whatever, or floor that wasn't there in our world. So obviously this kind of gets your attention.
Right.
So we've been working on that ever since. That has since expanded to about 330 square miles. It is now over in the Hudson Valley, which is every school child knows is, a UFO hotspot for sure. So, excuse me. So as a result, again, what we do is we use our show to draft reporters, a spy network, if you will. And what we always find needs watching, especially, is there is always the military or something that looks like the military in these flap areas every single time.
Wow.
Regardless of what country we're working in. And in the Connecticut case, there was a farm where there's no farming, and it's owned by an aerospace company. The land across the road where all the wires come from is owned by the U.S. Army. I mean, how obvious can you get? So, and we've had some adventures there. And again, why would they be in these areas? Well, wouldn't we love to weaponize the paranormal? These principles, worlds, being able to seem to manipulate space and time in the face of an enemy. And everybody underestimates this, the commercial value of being able to harness those powers.
Right.
It's another thing. And the military and industry has always been hand in hand with this stuff.
Yes.
So that's a background of how we came up with that.
Very interesting. I mean,
super interesting.
As we investigated some paranormal places, we know we were getting not ghosts coming through. We were getting perhaps, extraterrestrial life or life in different places coming
or
through.
Just people.
And I know a lot of teams have probably done that, and I'm sure if you interviewed enough, you could probably come up with a book worth at what's going on. But so I mean, it's amazing how this process has developed.
Oh yeah,
back from when you were started and until now.
My last book in 2019, Dancing Past the Graveyard, was I hated writing it because there were I'm always telling people don't do the medium thing because you don't know what you're really talking to,
Right.
And you hear about people pick up attachments and all stuff.
Yeah.
But I said, I have to write this because I'm not getting any younger. And, so there comes a point, you probably know this, where you don't care what people think.
Right.
We're there.
And,
we're there.
So I wrote it all down and it's in that book. But there were many encounters, the first of which took place in a psychiatric hospital where I was working at a pastoral capacity as part of our pastoral training in the seminary.
Yeah.
Now, this is St. Lawrence State Hospital in upstate New York. Not only was I assisting in exorcisms there, not pleasant memories, but there was one time where I decided, this is the first time this had ever happened to me, where I wanted to find out why a certain hallway was considered weird. I mean, the staff didn't like to be there. The patients would get all rowdy. And these were not necessarily psych patients. There were people who, didn't have the money for regular hospital. And, it was a state hospital. So there were mid patients in there too. And I've been talking to one Catholic lady, and because the seminaries would come and visit. And I said, she said she was a psychic medium. And I said, Catholics really aren't supposed to do that. And she said, oh, it's fine. You couldn't argue with it. So she said that there was a man waiting in the hallway, presumably a dead guy, who was waiting for his wife, and he was going to take her home. So I said, all right, perfectly plausible spiritualist approach, So I said, I'm going to find out about this. So I tried something I never done before. And there was this room in the hallway. It was supposed to be a chapel, but it was undeveloped. Nobody really used it. So I went in there, and the staff figured, well, he's a seminary student. He's, praying or something.
Right.
So I went into a meditation. I learned meditation from the Trappist monks of all people in Spencer, Mass. So I'm sitting there just relaxing and not attempting to communicate with anything. And all of a sudden I hear in my ear, hello. Not hello, hello. And over the next 3 nights, several hours at a time, I would go in there and I was communicating with this guy who spoke in very strange English. And he said he was waiting for his wife. And I said, my gosh, could she be right? But he was waiting for his wife across the river in Prescott, Ontario, Canada, at the railway station, where I myself had gone to Montreal 100 times. He was waiting for her to come home from Montreal on the train. He was going to take her home. So I said, what the hey is this? And I had never heard of anything like this in the literature. I'd never read anything about it. And I said, my gosh. Yeah, somebody's saying hello. You have to say hello. He would pronounce neighbors like neighbors. The accents were on the wrong syllables, And he would say, apparently in whatever world he was in, it was not unusual to talk to the neighbors, presumably people in parallel realities.
Right.
So, I mean, in our world, they fill your pockets full of antipsychotics and off you go. I'll be homeless or something, but maybe I ran into people in the state hospital who were supposedly schizophrenic, but they were living in worlds that I thought were real.
Right.
And I've addressed groups of psychiatrists on this. And, in public, the steam comes out of the ears and their eyes turn red.
Right.
But they'll come up to you, not all of them, but some of them, at the end and say, I believe the same thing, but if I said that, I lose my job.
Right.
So you got that. So anyway, this was the beginning of a string. They weren't, frequent of encountering many different kinds of entities that I later figured out must have been multiversal.
Right.
There were often language barriers. They often would be non-human. Sometimes they would just be neutral. And many times, and I found this interesting, they if they were like us, they would think I was a ghost, and they'd be afraid of me. And in one case, we actually had to go down to the basement of a house. The basement of a house, and convince the great grandparents of the current residents who had lived in an apartment down there like in the early 1900s, that they were not ghosts haunting them. And how do you get across, quantum mechanics to people from the early 1900s? But we did seem to solve the problem. But there was once in Tonawanda, New York, which Mark Twain always made fun of. He hated Buffalo, the Buffalo area. And there was a house where they were hearing sounds in their attic. And a seminary classmate of mine had called and knew I was into this stuff. And off I went to investigate this. And so you had just the sounds and a lot of heavy movements.
Yeah.
So I sat up there. It took me 2 nights, between 2 and 3, and I encountered a tremendously noble, bear-like being who said, in a very strange form of Latin, which I was picking through it. The case endings were very odd, and there were some words I didn't recognize. And I would hear it in my ear. And he said he was on a quest, blessed by this female deity, and he was on a quest for a place called Renthusia, which I'd never heard of before and never heard of again. So if I got it right, here's another parallel world thing going on.
Right.
And he talked to various travelers. Presumably I was one of those on his quest. Again, communicating through parallel worlds or the membranes between these or whatever.
Right.
So this opened up a whole new kind of approach. Now, after that first incident in 1973 in the hospital, I went back to the seminary. I didn't leave my room. I was so freaked out. I mean, they sent somebody to see if I was okay. But it took a long time to come to grips with that. Right. And the exorcisms, too, were not, in my opinion, what they appeared to be either. And that was in the same hospital.
And I think the Exorcist came out that year in 1973, right?
Yeah, December 73.
Yeah.
Well, that led right into the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974,
right?
Which is was forgotten pretty much for 40 years. And then Bill Hall wrote a book called The World's Most Haunted House. Mm-hmm. And it is arguably the best documented and the best witnessed poltergeist case, maybe in history.
Right.
So, as a matter of fact, I'm really, there's myself and a retired police officer are the only major witnesses still left of the case. The Warrens are gone, and everybody else who was there, the whole family, right. Including the little girl. So,
I don't know if you can see that question. Do you know anything about Michigan?
I've been there 50 years. There are always areas where that happens. I can tell you about Wisconsin. There's the square mile of weirdness in Wisconsin. But there are a lot of places around the Midwest. Missouri has Marley Woods, mm-hmm. which is an area that Ted Phillips was investigating in. Yeah. And he believed that these areas were very much in the grip of probes, either from parallel worlds or alien. Right. And that's alien too. I was dealing with alien.
Yep.
Michigan, to the best of my knowledge, around the shores of the lakes, which is pretty much the whole state, right. There are a lot of strange things. There are a lot of the Michigan Dogman sightings are very famous, and plenty of cryptid sightings of that kind. Yeah. I wish we had not lost Linda Godfrey, dear friend, and fellow journalist, absolute sweetheart, who broke the story about the Beast of Bray Road.
Right.
And she would talk about the Dogman. the personal encounters that happen. It was interesting to compare these with my own encounters, and people would get the impression that they were not supposed to see these things, and the various canine cryptids, upright canine cryptids, as Linda would say, would look at you as if I'm here and you're not, that kind of thing, and sort of a superior attitude,
Right.
as if they knew about the multiverse, and the poor sap who was looking at them didn't. So these are all, I think, different branches of the same tree. When it comes to paranormal and
it's all connected. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
sure.
I really believe it is.
Right. So
Michigan is just as weird as anywhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was
it is.
gonna say.
It really
You're
is.
saying that really this happens everywhere.
Yeah,
There are
that's true.
certain areas where things are a little stronger. Like we live on Houghton Lake, and it's the largest inland lake in Michigan. And there's just a lot of high strangeness in our area. It's probably why we live here. So,
Right. Well, our work at the Rendlesham Forest has been interesting because, well, here's a question. Hotspots be what they call ley line.
Yeah.
That's a common theory. Like all theories, I question it. I may be wrong. I don't know. But these are energy lines that supposedly kind of wrap the earth like a net.
Right.
But I think they tend to move. I've seen them move, especially the telluric current. And whenever Ben and I have been on the Travel Channel, they edit out everything intelligent that we say, with a few exceptions. And we were talking about this at length in a documentary that accompanied release of The Conjuring in 2013 called The Devil's Hour. You can still see it on the Warner Brothers site. But what we would say is that the telluric current goes zapping around the earth, kind of following the sun. And the question being, why is it the 3 or 4 or 3 o'clock in the morning is the devil's hour, quote unquote, and stuff happens? Well, it's probably because it's pre-sunrise and the telluric current is active. So a lot of these things aren't just geographic. There are a lot of geotechnic features that affect the paranormal.
Yeah.
For example, we're currently researching the Bouguer anomaly. Now, this is well known to engineers and geologists and seismologists as a recognized scientific anomaly. It's a gravitational anomaly. Where that is present, now you would expect if you were to walk down a hill toward a river, gravity would get a little bit stronger. You wouldn't feel it, but it would, and it is measurable. However, where the Bouguer anomaly is present, the opposite happens. You get a little lighter as you walk downhill, and they theorize that has to do with certain metals that are present and whatever.
Yeah.
But the point being, what did Einstein say about gravity? It bends space and time. Now, whether that would be enough to create the phenomena we all witness is another question, but we're researching that now. So there are a lot of ducks that kind of have to be lined up for this to have occurred,
Right.
So I don't mean to switch gears, but I'm going to. Paul, and you've done a lot of research on this. Well, why now? Why is the government acting like they're really interested in the UAP situation, the UFOs? I mean, are they being? I believe they have already known, and are we getting the right information? What's going on? Why now?
Okay, well, I'm going to ask a question that even one of the greats, Gary Nolan from Stanford, had to think about. And I said, he was speaking to our group, the Experience and Resource Team at MUFON, which meets once a month. And I said, Gary, Dr. Nolan, what's in it for the government to release anything to us as
Right.
far as disclosure is concerned.
Right.
And that kind of stopped him, you know. A lot of people don't think about that. The government doesn't do anything when there's not something in it for them.
Mhm.
So as a result, I am rather skeptical, as I am about so many other things, that whatever disclosure takes place will be accurate, complete, or even truthful.
Right.
Why should they tell us anything? I think what has been present in the documents that the Pentagon released so far, yeah, but these are things we all knew already. Anybody in the field, you know,
Right.
knew these
Right.
things already.
Right.
There's no big. Well, I think the big thing is the fact that they are talking about it. That is significant.
Yeah.
But the disclosure is going to come from us. We are the disclosure.
Right.
Exactly.
You know. So I just it is interesting. It's significant. But I don't trust them. We have Steve Bassett on our show a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Steve and I have gone round and round about this for years.
Yeah.
And I said, Steve, and you know, and I was in the service. I had a clearance, not very high,
Yeah.
but you know, and you don't know things unless you absolutely have to for a particular mission or whatever. You know, you don't just know stuff. It's a core mission and need to know only. But so I would ask you, do you agree with Stan Friedman that there are things that should be kept secret? He said, no. As far as this is concerned, I want to know everything. I said, suppose the truth is so horrible that, you know, that he says, I still want to know. Well, what could that truth be?
Right.
In my opinion, and my son agrees with me, he has a choice, he doesn't have to, is that I think people would be quite comfortable with the idea of alien life as long as it's like out there somewhere and maybe visiting, you know, no problem. We grew up with Mr. Spock and the Planet of the Apes and all these people.
Right.
But I think the real crisis would come. I think they know all about this multiverse stuff. If the aliens, along with everything you ever feared or everything you ever loved, is right next to us all the time, and we only can perceive it just a little, that I think would freak people out.
Yeah.
I think that's the secret.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, it's a very sensitive subject, and there's got to be something that I think they feel that would scare the hell out of us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's a lot of things out there that could benefit us. And
Presumably.
yeah, presumably, hopefully. And because, I mean, the people that have been in control, I can see why they wouldn't want this information out there, because it'll literally change what we're doing here.
Yes.
In many ways. And I mean, maybe our medical and our energy and all these fields would change, you know, and the money would go away.
Right down to religion.
That's the thing. Follow the money.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I say again, don't underestimate the commercial and industrial interest in these phenomena, because, you know, if you could transport something, you know, get rid of trains, get rid of trucks, transport huge amounts of cargo across some membrane without even really moving it, and there it is at its destination. Think of the money that would save and make.
Yeah.
So I think these are all probabilities about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people in the forestry business, we wouldn't have to cut down trees to build houses, and we don't today. We wouldn't have to really, if we had replicators, which I think guys in Germany really made one. If we had that, you know, nobody goes hungry. But, you know, all the jobs that would go away, I think that's a big fear for people. But in the long run, if we could only make them understand that, it would be better, that we could actually do other things and learn other things and and start doing something different than a 9-to-5 job, and actually using their imaginations and creating and having time to enjoy life, that would be fantastic. But again, that's a lot to handle for people to give up their what they know and what they're used to, and to have to be responsible for themselves.
Yes,
that's a big fear.
Well, that's the motto of our show. Everything you know is wrong.
Right.
Including us.
Right.
So, in the end, I think all we have is each other.
Yeah.
And certainly God, however you conceive of that.
Right.
So,
that's for sure, Paul. That is for sure. Well, you have had buku experiences. You've written 5 books.
8, I think.
8 books. Okay.
Yeah, working on a 9th. Ben and I have written 2 together. We're working on a 3rd.
Oh, nice.
And you're coming up on your show number 1,000. Is that right?
Yes, that'll be on June 11th.
My gosh. So you are certainly doing your part. And I personally want to thank you for being a voice, because there's so many people out there who are going through, even paranormal sightings, experiences, just all kinds of things. And, we are all about being the voice for these people, helping them to have a voice and normalizing the taboo bit.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Bless you. Seriously, bless
thank you, Deb,
for all that you have done and all that you do to help people. Seeing that you were involved in helping experiencers, with MUFON, bless you for that. That's huge.
Well, all the other experts were dead. I guess that's why they asked me. But it's MUFON is a very interesting group. I'm not a joiner, but I've joined MUFON. I think they have, as these groups go, they have a great deal of credibility, and they work with the government. That can be a good thing.
Yes.
But they don't like. I mean, I'm there to help deal with the high strangeness, the crossover phenomena that occur. For example, somebody will report an alien abduction experience. All of a sudden, they're having poltergeist activity in their house. The dining room table is on the ceiling, or the grandma's fine china is flying around the room.
Right.
So, and that's very common. But they don't like the word paranormal, so it's high strange. They had to change my bio on the website. So
that's okay. High strange is good.
Well, I mean, these are labels that we put on things that may or may not be relevant to what the actual definition is.
Right, exactly. And I think society has made paranormal all ghost hunting. Because of the shows and all of that. But really, paranormal is anything that's not normal as we see it. And that's most of what we do, right? So
that's very true. And, again, looking back over more than half a century, sure feels like more than half a century. As, as I say, the things that happen that smash your belief system are the toughest. For example, the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974. I was home from the seminary for Thanksgiving vacation, and Lorraine Warren was going to cook dinner. He never turned out a dinner made by Lorraine. So I headed down. I lived in Connecticut as they did. Headed down to their house, and all of a sudden Lorraine comes leaping out the door. "Are you in a high spiritual state right now?" And I said, well, I was in a terrible spiritual state, actually, because I was trying to decide whether to stay in the Roman Catholic Church.
Right.
So naturally, I said, "Yeah, I'm great. What's going on?" So down we go to Bridgeport, and that whole thing broke. But our whole concept was that this was a demonic attack. And in the course of this, and in the course of the exorcism of the previous year, I was helping a priest at that hospital I mentioned. And it was a matter of, I just didn't get the impression that they got it right, that there was more to this that went beyond the theology, and that's another story. But in the Bridgeport house, we assumed these were demons. When I had personal encounters with them, including a physical encounter, these are supposed to be spirits. You didn't have physical encounters with spirits. I was very shaken. And I came to the conclusion these things were parasites, not demons in the sense. I mean, they fit the bill, but the theology just didn't do it. So we also deal with the negative aspects of this. We're into that all the time, even today. Yeah. Look at all there is to feed on in the world, all the division, all the hatred.
Yeah.
And
archons, they call them archons, I think. Yep.
Yeah, that's another term. Yep. And or energy parasites, and that's becoming more accepted in the paranormal community, if you will. And we sometimes will go after, not go after, but we sometimes don't have the highest praise for ghost hunting groups, very few of which we have on our show. Right. But we'll get these emails and they'll say, "Hey, think twice before you run us down, because we're using your theories. We're getting amazing results." So I said, all right. That doesn't mean you should be doing it, But I once addressed, against my better judgment, they flew me down to Florida to address a group of beginning ghost hunters, and I said, "Oh boy." So at the introduction, they said, "Mr. Eno, if you have one word of advice, what would it be?" I'd say, "Don't." And 230 people kind of stared at me, and I said, "You have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what you're actually dealing with. But here we all are, so let's talk about it." So anyway, that was that's still my advice. You want to read about it. If it happens to you without looking for it, that's that's another thing.
So I don't know if you can see this. Can people contact you for help?
Yes, I can certainly give advice. My traveling is limited right now by my health, but people, if they go to behind the paranormal.com, there are links all over the place for contact.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's a link in your bio. Actually, maybe we can get Chanel to post that.
How do people listen to your show?
Well, they go to that site. It's on an AM/FM station in the Boston area, and that's WOON 1240 AM 99.5 FM. Obviously, a limited geographical area. Right. But the Paranormal radio app from TalkStream Live runs it live. It's noon Eastern time on Sundays, and the show was always posted on the major podcast apps. After that, the station insists on running a TV feed with it, so I can't dress like a bum anymore and go into the studio. So that's also on the station website, onworldwide.com. Most of our videos since 2017, and the whole archives of all 1,200 shows are at behindtheparanormal.com. Yeah, the 1,000. That's the numbered shows. That'll be a week from Sunday.
Wow! And how can people get a hold of your books?
Well, they're in some stores. Amazon has them. Everybody goes to Amazon. They're all available there.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
And do you you and your son work any events where people could meet you publicly?
Yes, we tend to be at a number of events each year. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm kind of limited in my mobility right now, but we do plan to be at the Exeter UFO Festival, Exeter, New Hampshire. That's dear to our hearts because we do a live show from there every year, and it's really quite cool. The station manager loves it. We put applause up, the whole place goes nuts. And
Love it.
So we have a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then we always speak there too.
Nice.
And I was supposed to be at the Arizona Dowsers Conference in October, but I talked to the organizer today, and I don't think, I got to work a few health things out first.
Mhm.
So I don't think I'll be there this year. Exit.
Yeah. And that's, that's part of life, is we have
Yeah.
to deal with the real life stuff with our physical bodies and all of that as
Right.
well. So, there are times that you can't be everywhere.
Well, the
But-
spirit is willing.
Yeah.
The spirit
Very
is
willing,
willing,
yes.
and people
Yeah.
can contact you, even on Facebook, and I would assume.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
or-
I have a personal Facebook page,
Mhm.
and the show has a Facebook page as well, Behind the
Okay.
Paranormal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I found you.
So do you think the whole
Oh.
planet? You think the whole planet is trying to move up into the fifth dimension, a different dimension, or that's why all this is going on? We're seeing all this, and
Yeah, we're down to 2 minutes.
people
so-
who are sensitive to it.
Wow, this went fast.
Yeah, 25 words or less.
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that astronomically, and astronomers have told us this, you've got this huge flattening out of the entire galactic plane, which is allowing all these energies to flow back and forth, the EM fields of all kinds.
Right.
They usually aren't that active. So I think the ultimate goal may be the unity. And a theologian named Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, talked about this in the 1950s, that everything is tending to come together, all the different worlds, to an ultimate perfect unity. And creation may be perfect. It just, we're not in touch with all parts of it,
Right.
and we don't feel the balance. So that's another story too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish we had more time, but we don't. We really want to thank you, Paul, for joining us. And
Absolutely.
we hope we can have you again sometime
It was a
soon.
great pleasure. Thank you very much.
You're so interesting,
Yeah.
and you're doing great work. God bless you for that. To all of our listeners out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Paul. Everybody.
Yes, thank you. We love you all. And until we meet again, may all of your awakenings be mystical. Good night, everybody.